congregation, which is a traditional brick and mortar congregation located here in the wonderful city of Vero Beach, Florida. And of late, we are also, of necessity, an inclusive and progressive virtual congregation without walls that serves people from all over the United States and the world by access of the internet and live streaming this Sunday, and as we will now every Sunday. And please know, as we say every week, you are welcome precisely as you come to us in all of your human particularity and charm, whether you're young or old, gay or straight, black or white, or Latino, or some other wonderful shade of humanity, whether you have visited, this is your first time visiting us, or you've been here for decades, whether you're feeling absolutely on top of the world this morning, or down in the dumps, or somewhere in between. We're glad you are here with us. We hope that you will find our service this morning meaningful and enriching, that you will find something here this morning to take with you that will make your life in the days and weeks ahead better, more enriching, more responsible, and more joyful. I have a number of announcements. For those of you watching us on the internet today, there is a Zoom coffee hour which the Reverend Crystal Boujol, who's one of our affiliate ministers, will be facilitating. The link, the link that we sent you also has the link to the Zoom coffee hour. It will begin immediately following this service. Please join Reverend Crystal Boujol. We have a live audience here. We have in-person church and internet church this morning. I'm now going to speak to those about 40 of you who are here with us this Sunday. Because of COVID restrictions and the necessity to be safe, we remind you to maintain safe distance, to wear your masks after the service. All conversations should please happen outside. We have benches, and there's plenty of room outside for you to catch up with anyone you would like to. We will be singing 2 hymns. We ask that you hum along to prevent the spread of anything through your mask, or sing the words very, very softly. The offertory will not happen because we don't want to pass anything. There will be baskets at the back door. As you leave, if you wish to put something in the offertory basket, please do so. And the ritual of rocks and stones, I will be placing stones in the water, and you simply call to mind and heart those that you're thinking of. Also, the Fair Trade Corner is open today for those of you here. One customer or one family group at a time. It's back there. We have a leak in the roof, but it shouldn't be too big a problem. And Pam is back there. So if you'd like to buy coffee or any of the other things, chocolates that we sell on a fair trade social justice basis, that is open today. Again, welcome, welcome. Our service now begins with the introit, All of Us Are Loved, by Amanda Eudice Kessler. She worked for me many years ago.
All of us are loved. Each of us is welcome. No one is a stranger. No one is an outcast. No one is alone. Everything we do, when our hearts are grateful, are faithful, makes a better world, one that we can call everybody's home.
Our opening words this morning come from my colleague Marianne Hatchen-Cotter. Welcome to this place of possibility, for this is love's hearth, the home of hope, a refuge for minds in search of truth unfolding, ever beautiful, ever strange, Here, compassion is our shelter, freedom, our protection from the storms of bigotry and hate. In this place, then, may we find comfort and courage. May our sight become vision, to see the unseen, and to glimpse the good that is yet to be. Our opening hymn, Love Will Guide Us, certainly a message of our church. Love will guide us. Join with us in singing or humming.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep inside you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way.
Join with me in the lighting of the chalice flame this morning. As autumn's darkness descends, let us kindle our light of faith and community, bright with the radiance of diverse people, warm and welcoming, radiant with hope.
Chalice, chalice, burning bright, help remind us with your light of how we'd like to live each day with love and truth, helping lead the way.
And now the time for all ages with our Director of Youth and Family Ministry, Kelly Stevens. Kelly?
Thank you, Reverend Scott. This morning, we have a children's story that focuses on the opportunity we have to give and show kindness to others, and how giving amplifies our own happiness. The story is Have You Filled the Bucket Today by Carol McLeod. All day long, everyone in the whole wide world walks around carrying an invisible bucket. You can't see it, but it's there. You have a bucket, each member of your family has a bucket, your grandparents, friends, and neighbors all have buckets. Everyone carries an invisible bucket. Your bucket has one purpose only. Its purpose is to hold your good thoughts and good feelings about yourself. You feel happy and good when your bucket is full, and feel sad and lonely when your bucket is empty. A bucket filler is a loving, caring person who says and does nice things to make others feel special. When you treat others with kindness and respect, you fill their bucket. But you can also dip into a bucket and take out some good fillings. When you make fun of someone, when you say or do hurtful things, or even when you ignore someone, that is bucket dipping. Bullying is bucket dipping. Many people who dip already have an empty bucket. They may think they can fill their own bucket by dipping into someone else's, but that will never work. You can only fill your own bucket by filling someone else's bucket. You feel good when you help others feel good too. If you practice, you'll become a great bucket filler. Just remember that everyone carries an invisible bucket, and think of what you can say or do to fill it. Bucket filling is fun and easy to do. It doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. It doesn't cost any money, and it doesn't take much time. When you treat others with kindness and respect, you fill their buckets. When you're a bucket filler, you make your home, your school, and your neighborhood a better place for all. Bucket filling makes everyone feel good and happy. Thank you for allowing me to share the time for all ages.
So now is the time in our service when the members and friends of our fellowship express their financial commitment to the ongoing work in which this congregation shares. Now, when we are able, like this morning, to meet in person, we collect the money, which we are doing at the back doors, for a worthy community service organization here on the Treasure Coast. And this morning, it's the Gifford Youth Orchestra, which is run by the Reverend Dr. Crystal Boujol, who is going to be doing the coffee hour, the Zoom coffee hour this morning. And you see on the graphic what they do. If during this time of remote services you wish to make a contribution to them, make a check out to Gifford, to the fellowship, UUFVB, but in the memo line, put Youth Orchestra, and we'll make sure they receive that donation after we receive your check here at our offices. And we would remind all members and friends of our congregation, whether they are here with us this morning or watching us on the internet, that we do need your continuing financial generosity, most especially in this difficult time of COVID. You can either use the convenient Donate tab found at the upper right-hand corner of our new UUFVB website, or you can simply mail us a check here to our offices, or if you notify our bookkeeper, you can automatically have pledges and contributions withdrawn from a credit card or bank account of your choice. Thank you for your generous support. The morning offering is now received. Because we are a caring religious community, we pause each and every Sunday during worship, whether we are gathered here at our facility in Vero Beach or whether you're coming to us on the internet, to take a few moments to share the joys and the sorrows and the prayers that are on our hearts this morning. I have several to share with you before I invite you to participate in our ritual of stones and water. First, have your hearts go out to a number of people facing physical challenges, medical situations. John Levy is home after a bout in the hospital with a serious lung condition. He's awaiting more treatment. His brother is here with him from California. John is at home. Cards and notes are appreciated. Paula Herger, our former music director, who's also dealing with medical issues, will be here next week. She's coming to visit, and will be at her home, and we send all of our love to her. Ken Heller is recovering well from a bout he had with COVID. He no longer has it and is doing well. And Pete Kersey is also at home recovering from a recent fall and other medical issues, and we send our love to him. Anniversaries this week. Harry and Susan Schmecky, who are with us this morning. 60 years! And Sandy and Jack Siplak, who I know are just back into town because I bike past their house every morning, and I saw their car here from Pennsylvania. They're having an anniversary as well. And birthdays today, the birthday girl Marion Wenzel is in the front row. And Gwen Forbes Wolf, Michael O'Malley, his husband is here this morning. Lisa Fitzcoy, Jim Daly, you have a birthday too. And Robert Schofield, who is not, who's still traveling. So welcome and happy birthday to, what? Oh, I heard somebody say something. All right. So, happy birthday to all of you. So now is our time for the ritual of stones and waters. As I go forward and place stones in the water, and this morning Bonnie and Marion will be signing our Spirit of Life song. We want you to call to your heart and mind all those who you are thinking of this morning. Prayers for the world, perhaps prayers for our nation. Whatever is on your heart this morning, express it. May our ritual now begin.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
So to introduce my topic of empathy, which has, as some of you know, become even an issue in this presidential campaign as to whether or not the candidate for president has any empathy, is this video, Understanding Empathy. It is a media clip by Tremendo.us from their website. We show it now.
There's a lot of anger and aggression swirling around the world these days. Whether it's in politics, race, religion, people tend to build walls to block out anyone they disagree with. Then they lob grenades over those walls, hoping the other side will either give in or go away. But that never solves anything. We should be tearing down these divides to enable conversations that lead to greater understanding, compromise, and real progress. Somehow, we must come to understand that no one perspective is the perspective. When we strive to see through the eyes of others, especially those we disagree with, we drive out hatred and bring in compassion. This is referred to as empathy, and it's something our world is sorely lacking. This empathy deficit doesn't bode well for our collective health and well-being, because a world without empathy breeds feelings of isolation, depression, and resentment, which only increases conflict. So, what can we do? Well, maybe we can't change the world, but we can change how we see the world. Here are a few things to try. 1. Just be curious. It might be hard at first, but try talking with people outside your usual circles so you can encounter perspectives different from your own. 2. When you do approach new people, challenge any preconceptions you may have by searching for things you have in common, rather than only identifying with what divides you. Behind every label is a person. 3. Simply try smiling more. You'll find it to be contagious, and it can even make you appear more approachable, leading to more socialization and feelings of connectedness. 4. Most importantly, pass it on. Model empathy by helping kids to be more considerate of other people's thoughts and feelings. Compassion breeds compassion.
And now, Standing on the Side of Love, our anthem.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide. And so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are standing on the side of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are standing on the side of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, fulfilling the vision divine. We are standing on the side of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are standing on the side of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are standing on the side of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are standing on the side of love. We are standing on the side of love.
Thank you, Ron, Kathy, and Elizabeth. Beautiful, beautiful. May your pillow catch fire. Early on the morning of August 14th, 1942, Nazi soldiers surrounded the Jewish ghetto in the town of Bobowa, Poland, and began rounding up all the men, women, and children. Terrified and still in his pajamas, 12-year-old Samuel Oliner hid on a roof and watched the terrible chaos below. Here, in his own words, is what happened next to him. After several hours, which seemed like a lifetime, I escaped from the ghetto. Peasants along the way told me what had happened. The trucks had taken the others, including my entire family, to a forest. There the Nazi soldiers forced them to undress in the most vile and humiliating way, and then made them walk about 60 feet across huge planks laid across a mass grave. They then shot them and watched them fall into the grave. It took 18 hours to kill those 1,000 people and bury them with a thin coat of soil. After that, Oliner went on, I wandered around the countryside for 3 days, dazed and in disbelief. I slept in barns or in fields and ate food off the land. Finally, I decided to go across the hills to the village of Bystra, where a Catholic woman named Balwina Pajciuch lived. Balwina knew my family from before the war. When I knocked on her door one night, Balwina immediately recognized me. She knew what had happened at Bobowa. She saw how scared and disheveled I was. She took me in and comforted me, hugged me, fed me, and offered to let me sleep in her attic. As I climbed the stairs, Balwina said, crying, "You poor boy, I will help. You must live." Balwina changed my name and taught me how to pretend to be a Catholic, and helped me find a job in a nearby farm. Thus it was that I survived the war. And then Oliner concludes, Balwina Pajciuch's act of kindness, compassion, and bravery not only saved my life, it formed my life. I emigrated to the United States after the war, became a sociologist, and spent my career understanding what motivates altruists like Balwina and the hundreds of thousands of other people during the war who put the welfare of others right alongside their own. Here is a picture of the eminent sociologist, Dr. Samuel Oliner, who is now 90 years old and professor emeritus at Humboldt State University in Northern California, a pioneering thinker who has devoted his very long and distinguished career to the study of altruism and compassion in human beings. And what, you might ask, has Dr. Oliner discovered about good people like Balwina Pajciuch? After he and his research team from the Altruistic Personality and Pro-Social Behavior Institute he founded at Humboldt State, interviewed more than 1,500 of what are now known as the righteous Gentiles, those brave non-Jewish Europeans who risked everything and endangered their own lives to rescue Jews. He's concluded that the one defining human quality these exceptional people all shared is that of empathy. Empathy simply for other people. It was empathy, pure and simple, that made these people so compassionate and brave. Again, Oliner, in his own words, we found a clear correlation between empathy and altruistic behavior. These helpers of humanity could simply not stand by and see others suffer. Altruists, unlike bystanders who did not help, had internalized somehow an ethic of caring and social responsibility which they had learned from their parents or other adult models. They all shared, he concludes, the capacity for love and compassion. Now, as a religious leader who has been thinking about our impossibly complex and difficult human drama for almost half a century now, I am passionately persuaded that empathy is one of the most important spiritual and ethical possessions anyone can have. Empathy is something we must both cherish and teach in our religious communities, and most certainly teach to our children and youth here at UUFVB. Again, Samuel Oleiner. Moral behavior is the consequence of empathy. Caring for others, a strong attachment to the moral community, and an ethical obligation to all life. Reaching out to others, he goes on, at considerable personal risk, as Balwina Pajcic did to me, that terrified 12-year-old boy, has been a force, the force, behind much that is good in our world. It has saved innumerable lives and inspired countless acts of generosity and heroism. The work of Samuel Oleiner and his research team, along with other researchers in this field, has persuaded me that, in fact, empathy, that quiet and unostentatious quality of the heart, is the spiritual prerequisite for compassionate and loving behavior in our lives. It is people infused with a simple, heartfelt empathy for their fellow humans who naturally act in compassionate and protective and altruistic ways. Said simply, it is most often the empathy which is in our hearts that empowers us to be good and caring human beings. It is empathy which leads to compassionate deeds and concrete acts of goodness, not to mention a more humane society. But not everyone in our culture agrees with or believes in the importance of empathy in human affairs. Perhaps some of you remember a decade ago now, during the confirmation process for Justice Sotomayor, that President Obama was harshly criticized by some conservative members of Congress for saying that one of the qualities he was looking for in a Supreme Court justice was empathy. It was as if these congressmen, and yes, they were all men, equated empathy with sentimentality, or the essence of being, quote, a bleeding heart liberal. The assumption seemed to be that a compassionate, empathetic Supreme Court justice would be an undesirable Supreme Court justice. And more recently, our current president, as I'm sure you are all aware, systematically exhibits an almost total lack of empathy toward others who are experiencing misfortune, whether it's in a hurricane or forest fires. He just can't find any empathy. Or the children, the 524 children he separated, his policies separated from their parents in last week's debate. He could not say anything empathetic about what they were going through, other than that they were being well fed and cared for in some stark federal institution. Shameful. In a recent editorial in the Washington Post entitled, We're officially witnessing the total failure of empathy in presidential leadership, conservative Republican writer Michael Gerson points out that at a time in our national life when empathy is desperately needed for those many Americans facing hardship because of COVID and the environmental crisis and the forest fires, the current occupant of the White House, because, as Gerson puts it, his defects of heart and character, has proven himself totally unable to be even the slightest bit empathetic toward others, whether it be toward those who have died or lost their jobs because of the corona epidemic, or, as I say, those suffering from hurricanes or wildfires. I further quote Gerson. The United States is now in desperate need of empathetic leadership. Empathetic leadership serves the purpose of reassuring vulnerable people that someone is on their side. It is not particularly helpful, he goes on, to urge this particular president to grow a soul. He seems totally incapable of such. But empathy in times of crisis is not some altruistic add-on. It is the manner by which a nation suffering is given purpose, and a method of assuring the vulnerable that they will not be forgotten. And then Gerson ends. If the president cannot feel empathy, he needs to fake it. Again, regardless of your station or status in society, empathy is one of the most important moral and spiritual possessions any of us can have. But with all that said about the importance of empathy, the question quickly becomes, what precisely is empathy? And two, is empathy for others something we can in fact cultivate and nurture in our lives and actually instill in our children? Let's begin by defining empathy, by looking at the etymology of the word itself. The English word empathy comes from the Greek word empatheia. Empatheia, the human quality of feeling into or feeling with another, which literally means feeling into. Empathy, then, as several authors that I consulted put it, is the quality of feeling into the situation of another. This is a much stronger human connection to another than sympathy, which I think of as the quality of feeling above, looking at someone and feeling sorry for them from above is sort of sympathy from a distance. While sympathy is an important level of human caring, empathy goes deeper and motivates us to actually do something tangible to relieve the suffering of others. I like the way my colleague Richard Gilbert from Rochester, New York, puts all of this. Empathy, which is feeling the feelings of others, he writes, is at the core of kindness. It is the irrational root of ethics. It is the central ingredient in human compassion. The word compassion, he goes on, comes from the Latin com, meaning together, and pati, meaning to suffer. Thus, the word means literally to suffer together. In German, the word is Mitleid, feeling the misfortune of the other. There are times, Gilbert goes on, when our only response to another's pain is to share it. Sorrow shared is sorrow halved, is an old German saying. Empathy, then, he concludes, comes from a feeling of deep sympathy for another, and it is accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate the pain or remove its cause. Sympathy, feeling pity, turns to empathy, feeling with, and finally issues in action to serve the needs of the neighbor, unquote. And empathy at its best, I think, is not some complicated intellectual process. It is rather a simple emotional one. I am reminded of the story about a 9-year-old girl who was sent by her mother for a loaf of bread at the store, which was a short 5-minute walk down the street from where they lived. When the 9-year-old had not returned home with the bread after half an hour, the mother grew concerned. Just as she was about to set out to see what had become of her daughter, the girl bounded in the door with the loaf of bread. "What on earth kept you so long?" the mother inquired. The daughter answered, "Well, on the way back from the store, I came upon a boy who had fallen off his bike and hurt his leg. I had to stop and help him cry." Empathy, then, pure and simple, is the quality of feeling with or feeling into another's predicament or pain. And because of this close identification with what that person is going through, it causes us to do something good or compassionate about it. So empathy in here leads to compassion and goodness out there. And the absence or total lack of empathy in the heart also, conversely, leads to great evil. I had a wise and learned old colleague on Cape Cod, the Reverend Peter Fleck, a survivor of the Holocaust, who went on to run the Rothschilds' banking interests in the United States, in New York. He was a great, great man. Collins and I have been in his home before he and Ruth both have passed away now. They would be over 100. On his deathbed, he said to Jennifer Justice, the minister in the Provincetown Church that he helped to serve, he said on his deathbed, "I've become convinced that human evil is only possible if you look into the eyes of another human being and do not see God there." As a Unitarian Universalist committed to the theological idea that lies at the center of our faith, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, I am passionately persuaded that this statement of Peter Fleck's is true. If we do not see our beautiful human commonality when we look into the lives or the eyes of another, then we can do great evil to one another. One painful example of this evil that happens when empathy is absent happened recently in the Washington, D.C. area, and it was reported in the Washington Post the next morning. One afternoon, an emotionally distraught woman had climbed over the railing on a high bridge on Interstate 95 over the Rappahannock River, which just runs through Virginia, through the suburbs of Washington. As a state police negotiator tried during rush hour to talk her into his arms and safety, impatient motorists who wanted to get home started yelling, "Jump! Jump!" And she did. But as real as such acts of indifferent cruelty are in human affairs, I want to flip this theological and ethical observation back to the positive. And that's where I want to take you this morning. Another positive way of saying this is that human goodness and compassion blessedly can happen and regularly do happen when we look into the eyes or the situation of another and see the reflection of God, or at least, if you're a humanist, the reflection of your best self. What Balwina Paichuk saw when that knock came at the door that night in 1942 was not some subhuman creature to hate as the Nazis had portrayed the Jews, but simply a precious fellow human being to protect, which she did. All right. So now we know what human empathy is. But then the next critical question I ask is, so can we cultivate this in our hearts? And can we teach? Is this something we can teach to our children? And the good news here, folks, is that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that empathy is a natural human quality that can be cultivated. The good news is that empathy is a natural human quality that can be cultivated. First, it seems clear we are all naturally born with it. In his wonderful book, Emotional Intelligence, Dr. Daniel Goleman asserts that all human beings come into the world with a strong empathetic impulse. The roots of empathy, he writes, can be traced to infancy. Virtually from the day they are born, infants are upset when they hear another infant crying. Infants feel empathetic distress before they even realize fully that they exist apart from other people. A response, he writes, that is the earliest precursor of empathy. And Dr. Harvey Hornstein, in his important little book, Cruelty and Kindness, asserts that parents, teachers, and other adult role models who model empathetic and compassionate behavior in their daily living can and do produce more altruistic, empathetic children. I quote him, "The development of empathetic, altruistic disposition in children is very much contingent upon the quality of parental behavior that the child observes. Parents who shower their children, I should say, with rewarding hugs, kisses, and kindness that they witness after acts of generosity by their children are more likely to rear empathetic, altruistic children than those who are coolly dispassionate when they see their children doing good." Again and again, in his interviews with the righteous Gentiles who saved Jews during World War II, Samuel Oleiner, discovered that these brave and empathetic people learned empathy from their parents. I quote him again, Belwina Pietrich. "My parents taught me to respect all human beings. My parents taught me discipline, tolerance, and service to others when people need something." I am honored to tell you that a couple of years back, when I was writing my first sermon about this whole topic, I had a conversation with Samuel Oleiner himself. Some of you have known me for a while. I was not born with the shyness gene. I may have been born with the empathetic gene, but I was not born with the shyness. So after I read about his research, I looked up Humboldt State University. I found his office phone number, and with great anticipation, I dialed his personal office line, and it went to voicemail. So I sent him the draft of my sermon, sent him my phone number, and 3 days later, he called. And in the Polish accent that he had not been able to get rid of with all these years in the U.S., he called me back, and we had a wonderful 30-minute conversation about my sermon. And he said to me, and I'm going to try to do his little accent a little bit, "Reverend Alexander, I'm very much an optimist about human behavior and goodness." And then he said, "We know it's easy to teach prejudice and hatred. Individuals and communities of people successfully teach hate all the time." But he went on, "I am passionately convinced that we can also teach altruism and empathy at home and in our schools and in churches like yours, where we have a captive audience," he reminded me. "We can teach our children to think and act empathetically and compassionately." And so if the good doctor is right, and I pray and believe he is, empathy is something we can cultivate and instill in ourselves and in our young people. And in our young people, by exhibiting it, here's the rub, we have to exhibit it ourselves. The bottom line truth is that our kids and other young people are paying very close attention. You know, the old saying was in the 70s, they have great crap detectors. They can always see a gap between what you say and what you do. If we live empathetic lives, they see and believe empathy to be a good thing and will begin to treat others with similar respect and compassion and care. And this is perhaps the greatest moral responsibility we have as parents and grandparents and adult caretakers, to express regularly and model regularly empathy and care for others, which we can then share. And several biographies of our current president say that his father gave him no training, absolutely, in kindness or empathy or decency, and look what we've got. And there is one more important piece to this empathy equation, and that's our theological beliefs. Karen Armstrong, her great book, The Great Transformation, there's the jacket of it. She asserts that in the 9th century, from the 9th to the 2nd century BCE, in other words, 9 to 200 years before the birth of Christ, which she calls the axial age, 4 distinct religious traditions, quote, that have continued to nourish humanity powerfully to the present day. These 4 traditions being Confucianism, Taoism, Confucianism and Taoism, Hinduism and Buddhism in India, monotheism in Israel, and philosophical rationalism in Greece. These 4 traditions all moved in response to the violence and the inhumanity of their age to articulate a new ethic of empathy and compassion toward human beings everywhere. I quote her, "The axial age was pivotal in the spiritual development of humanity. The prophets, mystics, philosophers, and poets of the axial age, both East and West, taught a spirituality of empathy and compassion. They insisted that people must abandon their egoism and greed, violence and unkindness, and embrace respect for the sacred rights of all persons. Each of these traditions," she writes, "developed its own formulation of what is now called the Golden Rule. The axial traditions all taught that if people behaved with kindness and generosity to their fellows, they could save the world," unquote. As Unitarian Universalists, we, of course, flow directly out of this universal ethic of the axial age, and we flow directly out of the ethics of Christianity, which developed later. Our spiritual and ethical roots are primarily Judeo-Christian and humanist, and as a faith, we have always taught the importance of compassion and connection between persons everywhere. Empathy is indeed a part of what we call ourselves. We are Unitarian Universalists. Universalists who, for the hundreds of years since our founding as a spiritual tradition, have seen and affirmed the universal, indissoluble oneness of humanity. This is our religious tradition. We are a tradition of empathy and compassion and connection. Indeed, one can say that the primary purpose of our religion is to cultivate and strengthen empathy and compassion in each of our lives. Our religion calls each of us out of the narrow confines of concern for the self. Oh God, do we need this in America today? To a wider ethic of compassion and connection with human beings everywhere. This is the soul and the substance of our religion. Connection and compassion. I want to end this morning by telling you an old tale it's an old Hasidic tale told by Elie Wiesel when he was alive, which reminds us of the power and the goodness of empathy. The story goes back to the days of the Roman Empire. It seems that a young Jew in his late teens in Jerusalem wanted to journey alone to the great city of Rome, which was then the bustling capital of the world as he knew it. A terribly exciting, adventurous destination for any young man. Well, his mother, as mothers are wont to do, protested about the dangers and difficulties of such a trip. But how will you manage? She asked him. How will you eat? Where will you sleep? Well, as an adolescent, he, of course, didn't really have any satisfactory answers. He just wanted to go on his big trip. He persisted, begging her for permission to go to Rome. Finally, his mother relented, saying, well, all right, perhaps you'll somehow make do finding food and work, but for sleep, you must take this pillow. And every night you must go outside the walls of Rome, find a nice place under a tree, and go to sleep using this pillow, so I know you will be at rest. Well, he went off to Rome, and each evening after enjoying the sights and sounds and sensations of the busy city, he did in fact venture out to the countryside, beyond the walls of a city with his pillow and other spare belongings, to find a peaceful place to sleep. It went on like this for many days, but one night, just as the boy was falling asleep, his pillow caught fire. It spontaneously burst into flames. Wiesel, in his story, says, why was this so? The pillow caught fire that night because that night the temple in Jerusalem burned. And then Wiesel explains, it was the flames of empathy, concern, and connection with his community back home that kept the Jewish boy awake that night. Wiesel says that all Jews, no matter how far they wander from Jerusalem, mystically belong to one another in an indissoluble human community of connection and empathy. Thus it was empathy, pure and simple, that kept the boy awake that night. Causing his pillow to burst into flames was the suffering back home. So here is the bottom line this morning, dear friends. Empathy is the most important and valuable possession any of us can have because it keeps us awake to and protective of the worth and dignity of other persons. And it increases our own humanity and worth. So may your pillow catch fire. Over your lifetime, may your heart grow in its capacity to express and embody empathy for others. May your pillow catch fire. May you evermore each become human beings who know deep to the heart of your indissoluble connection and responsibility for your fellow human beings. May your pillow catch fire. And may empathy, pure and simple, evermore infuse and ennoble your humanness. May your pillow catch fire. Amen. Let us sing our closing hymn.
I see another's woe, and not be in sorrow too. Can I see another's grief, and not seek for kind relief? Can I see a falling tear, and not feel my sorrow share? Can a father see his child weep nor be with sorrow filled? Can a mother sit and hear infant groan and infant fear? No, no, never can it be. Never, never can it be.
And I send you on your way this week with these simple words of the Saint Mother Teresa. Spread love everywhere you go. First of all, in your own house. Let no one ever come to you without leaving better or happier. Be the living expression of God's kindness. Kindness in your face. Kindness in your eyes. Kindness in your smile. Kindness in your warm greeting. Spread love everywhere you go.